Good morning to you all. I hope you are all safe and sound wherever you are. In the last lecture, we talked about how people respond to incentives and how people take decisions. We talked about the trade-offs, we talked about the incentives and the opportunity costs. Now, in this lecture, we would discuss how societies interact with each other or how people interact with each other in the society. Now, the principle number 5 is that the trade can make everyone better off. We are no longer in a closed economy where the trade does not happen. Nations trade among each other. And the reason why they trade is because the trade can make everyone better off. Now, you know that the reason why they trade is because different countries produce goods in which they have lowest opportunity costs. So, opportunity cost, as I mentioned in my last lecture, is about what you give up to get that. Now, how much resources you need to spend to be able to produce the good is an indication, and then in order to use this resource to produce a particular good, you're giving up these resources for use somewhere else, right? So those are the opportunity costs. If I'm using all my labor in producing, say, roads, I have less labor available for other users. So this imposes opportunity costs on the economy. Now, if I'm pursuing a particular path, say A, I am using because I think that I have competitive advantage in that, or I have a comparative advantage. So that actually makes me more efficient, and efficiency means you are reducing the cost, producing something at a lower cost. And because you have lower opportunity costs, so you actually trade this with other nations. And then people gain because of their ability to trade with one another. And also because of the trade, and there is also competition. There should also be competition to cut down their costs, right? So we need to be more efficient, and trade brings in this efficiency. Trade also allows people to specialize in what they do best. So not all of us can actually be good in all the aspects. We may have some positives and we may not be able to do the other ones. So we need to identify our strengths and invest where we think we are good at. So because trade improves the quality of life for everyone, or nations are better off because of trade. Now, most of the countries have opened their borders, and now they import so there is like the borders are all porous, as you know. And so that's basically the phenomenon which is called as globalization. And you will see that now you have movement of products from all over the world, right? You will see that computer hard disks, for example, are made in Malaysia. DVD players are manufactured in Thailand. Garments, say for example, you will get assembled in Guatemala or maybe Thailand. You also get from Vietnam, Bangladesh. Mountain bikes are made in China. You get coffee from Brazil, Kenya or Colombia. Canned fish and fruits from Peru and Australia, and bananas and other tropical fruits from Central America. So it's though you're in India, you might as well get all these products made somewhere else. So that's basically because, and they are able to supply you at the least cost. So, and these days, like, you also have something called as medical tourism. I hope you all know about it, where because, say for example, the dental facilities in India are much more cheaper compared to USA. So if you have serious dental problems, people from USA come to India to get treated. So there is also like, so medical tourism is also like booming. Thailand, for example, have many tourists go there for medical tourism purposes. So there are like gains from trade because of globalization, of course, because of the movement of goods and services from one part of the world to another, and that to the country which has the least cost is able to produce that. Now, this particular figure or the map shows you what is the comparative advantage of different countries. Now, if you just see, for example, India has a comparative advantage in precious metals or minerals, whereas USA, for example, has in electronics. China has in electronics. Then if you look at Africa, like they have metals or minerals. Latin America has food or drink sector. So different countries have different comparative advantages. Right? You have the giants in Japan, all of them have comparative advantage in electronics. Japan, Korea, the Asian tigers, they have comparative advantage in electronics. So each and every country has some comparative advantage, and looking at that, they trade on the one which they specialize in. But there has been an argument whether trade can really make all the nations better off or not, equally or not. Yes, the gains from globalization are actually substantial for countries at early and middle stages of integration, such as Ethiopia, India, Brazil, China, and Russia. But then there are some smaller countries, but it has been smaller for countries that are already more globalized, such as for United States. So in different stages of globalization, different countries have gained. So it may not be, the situation is more dynamic and it may not be static. And the situation would keep changing over time. So that brings us to principle number 6. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. So by meaning market economy, it's an economy that allocates resources through the decentralized decisions of many firms and households as they interact in markets for goods and services. It's more of decentralized decision making. It's just the demand and supply gone are the two forces in the market economy. So it's households in this kind of market economy, it's a household who decide what to buy and who to work for. And firms decide who to hire and what to produce. And what is market? Market is nothing but a group of buyers and sellers, and they need not be in single location. It was not like the earlier days wherein markets means it used to be physical markets, but now we are all operating in a virtual world, right? So it's a group of buyers and sellers can be located anywhere else, and we have Amazon, Flipkart, and many other e-commerce happening. So it's not only about the physical market, but it can also be a virtual market or e-market. So by meaning organizing of economic activity, what we mean is determining what goods to produce, how to produce them, how much of each to produce, and who gets what is produced. So this is organization of the economic activity. And this principle says that markets are usually a good way to organize the economic activity. So this kind of market economy goes back to Adam Smith, who made this observation that the households and firms interacting in markets act as if they are guided by an invisible hand. So he actually said the governments actually need not intervene. Just leave it to the market forces of demand and supply, and everything would be taken care of. So the reason being, households and firms, they look at the prices when deciding to buy and sell, and they unknowingly take into account the social cost of their actions. So as a result, what happens is that the prices, they guide decision makers to reach outcomes that tend to maximize the welfare of society as a whole. Initially, when the resource is scarce, or suppose there is a technology which is it's a limited edition technology, and there are very few suppliers, then the prices would be very high if the demand is high for this. But then, as the technology becomes available, then there would be more suppliers, because driven by the higher price, seeing the higher price, there would be more suppliers in the market. Now, there would be excess supply, and that brings down the price, right? So then there would be, so looking at the price, because most of the consumers are actually very price sensitive. So looking at the lower prices, there would be more demand, and then the market forces interact and then come up with equilibrium price and quantity. So that's the reason why markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. And principle number 7 of says the governments can sometimes improve the market outcomes. So in the earlier principle says that governments need not intervene at all. It's the invisible hand, and you just leave everything to the market forces, things would be taken care of. But this principle says governments can sometimes improve the market outcomes. That is the reason why, because sometimes markets may not work properly. And in that case, government intervention becomes necessary. Now, so markets work, there are certain conditions for markets to work properly. Markets work only if property rights are enforced. So what are property rights? The property rights are the ability of an individual to own and exercise control over a scarce resource. They should have complete right over the property, or it can be a patent or the product that's developed. So the individual should have some right over the resource. For example, the copyrights, patents, property, all of that come under the property rights, well-enforced property rights. So we also have the intellectual property rights. So all of these fall under this category. Now, market failure occurs when the market fails to allocate resources efficiently. So the principle number 6 talk about markets would allocate the resources efficiently because they are driven by these prices, but then sometimes market fail, and in that case, the resources cannot be allocated efficiently. And so in such cases, when markets break down or market fails, then the governments, they intervene to promote efficiency and equity. So what are the various causes of market failure? There are various reasons why markets don't work the way we want them to work. Example, public and merit goods. Now, if the roads are laid in remote locations where there are not many users, but then still the entire country needs to be connected by good infrastructure, you don't see many private players entering that segment, because the private players, mostly they look at the profit as a motive, right? In that cases, governments need to intervene to provide these public goods just for the common use of everyone, where you cannot exclude anyone. Public good is one which you cannot exclude anyone from using that good. So merit goods, for example, also like education is a merit good. By educating people, you are doing good for the society. There are positive spillover impacts of education. So public and merit goods, there are often there are missing markets. Why you might ask this question, why do you think education is like, why there are no private players in education? There are, but you know that private schooling can be very expensive, and there are many children who will not be able to afford this expensive education. In that case, government has to intervene to make sure that the education is provided at minimal cost, or it should be free. Many countries, in fact, have a free education till the primary. So that's a compulsory, and it is free for all. So definitely, yes, governments intervene in such cases where there are missing markets. And second reason why markets can fail is because of immobility of factors of production. Suppose you have mining areas. There are the factors of production. The key input is the raw material, but then these factors are immobile. You really have to go to a place where this input is available, because you cannot move the ores to any other place. So that creates a kind of entry barrier, and that leads to market failure. Third case why markets can fail is because of lack of competition or monopoly power. Where there is no competition, obviously I can dictate the price. I can control the results. Right? So for example, earlier the oil and natural gas, that there was not much competition in the segment, though there are private players, but then mostly like we have nationally owned companies. Now, you might see that the latest move, the Bharat Petroleum, BPCL, has been like privatized. It has been at least approved, the privatization has been approved. Basically, this is to make sure that there is no monopoly power. But then that's a different issue of whether or not there are certain conditions that need to be fulfilled to promote competition. So we need to analyze these conditions to understand whether that would be successful venture or not. Then other root causes of market failure can be poverty and inequality in the society. There are so many people who are poor. Now, if you are asking them to pay for the results, for example, it may be efficient to privatize the utilities, for example, like the drinking water infrastructure. But then the moment you privatize, the privatization involves, if you are consuming a certain results, you have to pay for the results. Now, but would poor pay for the drinking water, or would they pay for their food when they have limited income earning opportunities? So the market forces would break down unless the government intervenes. Then that means you're excluding a large part of the society to consume a particular resource that's an essential service, which is not acceptable. And there is also a lot of inequality in the society. And you see, typically we have the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And that is actually increasing the income gap between the rich and the poor. And especially after globalization, there are studies which indicated that the gap between the rich and the poor actually has widened. So governments intervene to reduce this gap by giving more opportunities for the poor. So other reason for market failure can be information failures in the market. Information failures are, for example, we call something like moral hazard and adverse selection. I really do not have adequate information about you, or you have more information than me about you. Right? Suppose when many of the companies come and hire people, potential employees, the candidate knows what is good and what is his strength and what is his weakness. But the job resume that I put in the job market may not actually be reflective of my real original potential. So there is some kind of moral hazard problem there. I really do not have much information about you than you know about yourself, right? And that's the reason why companies actually try to have this kind of performance-based incentives, because I do not know whether you're really working or not and how motivated you are to work. The companies usually like have this kind of variable pay scheme to be able to incentivize the employees to give their best. Or there can also be an adverse selection in the market. Adverse selection is these days, if you know, there is like organic and inorganic products in the market, vegetables especially. So we have, but then the organic and inorganic vegetables, they both look alike. Now, I might sell a particular product as an organic product, but then I really do not know whether or not it is really organic. What are the inputs that have been used in producing this particular commodity, right? So there is a lot of, I might actually think something is organic and then pay a higher price and end up buying an inorganic product. So there is a lot of these adverse selection because I'm not able to pay the right price for the right product because I don't have much information about the farmer's production practices. So there is a lot of this is an information failure in the market. So in that particular case, it can be, so that's the reason why we have the certification schemes, which would say like, ratify a particular product based on the production practice. So that would sort of try to bridge in this information failure, but then the key thing is that it's like, yeah, there is an information failure and you require a regulator to be intervening in the market. Similarly, we have this now green housing, like we have the Griha and the LEED rating system to understand what is basically how environmental friendly our housing is. So these are all instances. So the Griha and LEED is a kind of a certification scheme. So the other prime reason why markets fail is because of externalities in production and consumption. I've already mentioned, I used this word externalities in the last lecture, but now we will discuss a bit in more detail. Now, externalities in production as well as consumption. What are these externalities? Externalities is the impact of one person or firm's action on the well-being of the bystander without actually paying for the product. I'm not really paying that. I'm not going and buying it in the market, right? For example, when the firms produce a good, then as a byproduct, it's not their intention to do so, but as a byproduct, they also pollute the environment because there are like air and water effluents. And this actually creates pollution. And most of the polluting sources, they are non-point source pollution. It doesn't really matter where produced, but you know, the downstream users would be the one who are more impacted. So in that particular case, we are creating an external, the downstream segment or the consumer who is using that particular, who is staying in that locality is the one who is most impacted because of this pollution. Now, and he didn't demand that pollution, he didn't want it, he didn't pay for it, but without even paying and going and buying in the market, he is actually consuming it. That means my utility function had some variable which I did not really want to be in. So that's an externality, okay. And similarly, like there can be consumption externalities as well. Now I might want to like to change the mobile phones every year whenever a new product is launched. But mobile phones, for example, are extremely polluting. Because of my consumption behavior, I am actually like polluting the environment. So there are like externalities on both the sides. There can be both consumption externalities as well as production externalities. So in that, when there is externalities, of course, government would intervene actually to improve the market outcomes. For example, what they do is they might want to tax a polluting good. Use of plastics is a very simple example, right? I go to the supermarket or I go to the department stores and buy something. So instead of carrying my own bag, which is not environment, which can be reusable, I might just use a polythene bag, and then I can just then dump it somewhere, which goes, and how the cattle are being impacted, how biodiversity is being impacted because of this plastic waste. Now, in order to discourage consumers from using this plastic, the government has different mechanisms. For example, they may ban the polythene, which are like less than a particular microns, or they may start levying. They may now, the bags may not be available for free, but then they may start charging the bags. That's why you might have seen that these days the departmental stores would actually charge the consumers for the bag, like 5 rupees for a medium one and 10 for a larger bag. So this automatically discourages consumers from actually opting for a polythene bag. Instead, they would take their own cloth bag, which can be reusable. So that's basically a government intervention. So governments may basically they intervene to reduce this particular outcome. And the other way through which governments intervene is in the area where there is market power, excessive market power. We have governments intervene and they deregulate, or they also make sure that there are we have MRTP Act, which is Restrictive Trade Practices Act, Monopoly Restrictive Trade Practices Act, wherein they do not encourage large firms. They instead try and encourage smaller firms in the market. So that's the market power. So market power is the ability of a single person or firm to unduly influence market prices. And governments may alter these market outcomes to promote equity, right? Because if the power is in one person's hand, they actually squeeze the output, price the product higher, and it would actually have impact for a large section of the society. So the governments, if they think that the market's distribution of economic well-being is not desirable, tax or welfare, they have tax or welfare schemes, they design it in such a way that the economic pie is actually divided across sections of the society. So that basically brings us to the end of the second, how people interact among each other.